This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and today we're in Maine, introducing a man who has spent 6 decades at the intersection of American law and leadership. He is a former member of the Maine House of Representatives and a former state commissioner who has transitioned from the world of public service, really, to an author who has become one of our nation's most provocative political forensic analysis. Jack, welcome back to CNTV.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Jack, having published multiple historical novels, you now have turned your pen toward a searing nonfiction trilogy that explores what you describe really as the sorry state of our union. In this latest and final installment, you pull back the curtain on what you identify as a rapid descent from democracy to autocracy. Why is this book, would you say, so relevant right now?
Well, my last book, which we talked about, Democracy, the Final Nail, detailed the transition from democracy to oligarchy. And I said in that book that the next logical step from oligarchy is to autocracy. That's happening in front of our eyes. We have a president who is bent on consolidating power within the executive to the demise of the Congress and the court systems, and take over completely as a dictator. He's got us into a war without consulting the Congress, as is dictated by the Constitution. And that's just the latest step in the movement to autocracy.
I mean, this is the trilogy's conclusion. How does this book tie together the themes of economic outrage and the breakdown of democracy explored in your previous two works, would you say?
Because it's all been a consistent and trip over 45 years, and gradual trip. The first thing we had to do to transition from democracy to oligarchy was to create a privileged class of wealthy people. We've done that through trickle-down economics and 45 years of tax cuts for the wealthy. Then you had to create a system where the wealthy upper class could use their wealth to influence the government. We did that with Citizens United. You're seeing $300 million campaign contributions to one candidate. Just completely ridiculous. Here in Maine, we have a Senate race coming up, and the incumbent senator started advertising in January. She has so much money, she can't spend it fast enough. She even had Super Bowl ads, the most expensive ads you can buy, 9 months, 10 months away from the election. It is ridiculous how money is controlling our political system. And once you reach that step where billionaires, the class of billionaires has been created, and you've given them the power to use their money to influence the government, the next step is to autocracy. So it's a continuous chain, and the three books spell it out. This latest book, sadly, gives an account of the state of the union, which is not good.
Absolutely. I mean, let's jump right into some of these current topics that you touch on. A significant portion of the book details aggressive military actions in Venezuela. Why do you believe the administration chose this specific nation as a primary target for what you've described as really resource theft?
There's a quote in the book from a guy who was way ahead of his time, George Carlin, who once said, "The United States is basically an oil company with an army." The invasion or the bombing of crafts in international waters, the invasion of the capital of Venezuela was all about oil. And you'll notice that our power-hungry president squirreled away $500 million in an account, an offshore account, from the oil that he took and then sold. And that offshore account is controlled by him, by the way. It's not for the benefit of anybody in Venezuela or anybody in the United States except him. But that whole thing was about oil, and the whole thing in Iran is about oil. It seems like most wars we get into since World War II are about oil, and Venezuela certainly was. Those boats that they bombed, they had no capacity to get to Miami. The idea that they were doing that to keep drugs out of the country was ridiculous.
Interesting. This administration's actions began heavily with Elon Musk. I mean, you were highly critical of the Department of Government Efficiency, what is known as DOGE. Why do you believe the elimination of federal agencies like the U.S. aid without congressional involvement is such a critical constitutional violation?
Because the agency they did away with was established by the Congress. Congress, under the Constitution, has the power of the purse. They control spending. For them to set up an agency, only they can do away with it. DOGE comes in. By the way, a South African citizen comes in with a lot of money, takes over this DOGE agency, and eliminates agencies created by the Congress without congressional approval. That's a direct violation of the Constitution. What's more, if this whole DOGE operation was to uncover fraud, why were there no charges, no convictions, no savings? By the way, we run up $2 or $3 trillion in debt under the Trump administration. If DOGE was there to save us money, why are we running tremendous deficits? And if he was there to uncover fraud, why have there been no charges filed? He was there to do Donald Trump's bidding, is why he was there. By the way, they also stole a number of a bit of information that they had no right to take in the Social Security system, in the tax office. They have that now. Elon Musk's organization has privileged information about Maine, United States taxpayers, and people on Social Security in this country that he has no business having.
I mean, a topic of interest remains over the Epstein files. You detail a legal battle over the release of these files. What do you believe the administration's dribs and drabs release strategy kind of tells us about the relationship between political power and high net worth campaign donors?
Well, I think it tells you everything. The reason that they have been the Department of Justice has been so reluctant to release the Epstein files is very simple. Number one, President Trump's name is in there hundreds of times, literally. Number two, the names of some of their very wealthy donors, not only in the administration but in Congress, are peppered through the Epstein files. There is ample evidence in those files to convict several very high rollers in this country, but they keep it close to the vest to protect their donors and to protect the president. Simple as that.
And as most would agree, they're protecting both sides out there. I mean, Jack, I have a balanced audience out there. I got left, I got right, I got independents. I mean, so half the country may feel like the other half is overreacting by saying the sky is falling. Okay. Governor Gavin Newsom says there may not even be midterms unless people wake up. What specific tactics do you anticipate may be being used to disrupt or even discredit the 2026 election results?
You're already seeing the president is making every effort to take control of how elections are run away from the states and to consolidate it within the executive branch of the federal government. That is also contrary to the Constitution, which spells out that the states have the authority to run elections. That's the first step. Well, actually, the second step. The first step was the gerrymandering in Texas, and then it was followed by gerrymandering in California by Gavin Newsom. To me, gerrymandering is a very undemocratic process. To have different states competing to see who can do the most gerrymandering is a race to the bottom in terms of democracy. But that's what we have right now. Not only that, I have this president would have at his disposal on election time. He can institute policies that would involve not only ICE agents detaining people and holding them till after the election based on the color of their skin to keep them from voting in the election. He can also bring in the military under the Insurrection Act, and he has great authority to do that without involving the Congress. And even if he did have to involve the Congress, I'm sure that they'd rubber stamp his actions. But if he initiates the Insurrection Act, He can use the military to intimidate voters. He can use them to seize voting ballot boxes after the election and bring them into Washington. There are a host of things he can do. And believe me, they can be done, and they will be done. Because the way things are looking is the incumbents aren't going to fare well in the election.
Would you say the Supreme Court's ruling or presidential immunity has maybe changed the way even an administration can use the Justice Department, maybe as a weapon or even as a vendetta machine? Touch on that for me.
There's no question. The decision by the Supreme Court granting immunity was a disaster. And let me tell you why. I had somebody tell me, well, it's limited immunity. And I said, well, you may think so, and the court may have thought so, but I can guarantee you that President Trump doesn't think it's limited in any way. And he's acting as if it's not limited. Not only that, but let me ask you this. If the President of the United States has immunity in his actions as president, why doesn't the Secretary of State? Why doesn't the Secretary of Defense? This thing could just extend. That ruling made the President of the United States, or at least this president, the only person in the history of our country above the law. How do you stop the Secretary of State from making the same claim if charges are brought against him or her for actions they took in office? Why can't they make the same claim that they have immunity based on that ruling by the court? It could be a Pandora's box that we suffer through for years.
Yeah, Pandora's box. I mean, so the Supreme Court, as well as Congress, they play a part here. I mean, you frequently mention the relative silence, really, or cowardice of Congress. As a former elected official yourself, what do you believe would be required to motivate these members of the opposition to effectively get some results?
That's a good question, because I ask all the time, how much is going to be enough? Not only for the Republicans in Congress to act and defy the president, but for the Democrats to get off their duff and do something. And people give me the tired excuse, well, they're in the minority, what can they do? There are a lot of things they can do. You could have 3 or 4 Democratic senators going around the country holding public events to let people air their grievances. You can file lawsuits against the president. You can do that as a congressperson or as a group of congresspeople. For example, the Justice Department just awarded $1.2 million to the former advisor to President Trump, Mr. Flynn, for a crime that he confessed to. He pled guilty to the crime. Then he files a suit for malicious prosecution, and the Justice Department awarded him $1.2 million, so it never had to go to court. If it had gone to court, it would have been laughed out. So if you're a congressperson, why aren't you filing some type of lawsuit against that? They don't do anything except complain, and that doesn't do any good.
Many people are just afraid to stick their necks out, and actually they're in a position where that's really what they got voted in for, is to speak up and let people know. Jack, you served as a representative in the Maine House, also as a commissioner. Having been really inside that room where policy is made, was there a specific moment or maybe a realization that convinced you that you could no longer work within the system and instead needed to maybe write a trilogy exposing all these flaws?
Maine has basically escaped much of the problem that I see in Washington. Maine is a small state, and I think the people who serve in the Maine legislature and our governors and administrators have basically been very honest people, and they're there to serve the public. I said this on another interview. When I was an elected official and my father thought maybe I was getting a little big for my britches, he'd always remind me, you are a public servant, there to serve the public. I think most people in Maine still see themselves that way. I can't say that about the United States Congress. I think there are damn few of them who see themselves as public servants. They see themselves as a privileged class of people.
Interesting. Before we let you go, you mentioned your sons and your granddaughters as a primary motivation for your work, really. When you look at the sorry state of the nation that you've described, Do you view these books that you've written as a warning for them to change course, or more maybe of a survival guide against the autocracy you believe is fast tracking toward their future?
I wrote these books uh, because of what I see happening to my country. I want people to read them and see what's happening to their country. I'm willing to answer any questions from anybody who reads it and thinks I'm off base for one reason or another. I have a website. They're welcome to send questions. I'm glad to debate it. I want people in this country to stop. I say this in the book, or actually on the back cover. Stop believing the sound bites paid for by oligarchs around election time and start looking at what's happened to your country, because it's very, very frightening. And yes, I have 5 granddaughters, and I'm concerned with the future that they're going to face in the United States of America.
Once again, as always, great speaking with you. I'm excited to see this final book that you put together. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen right there. What you're going to see is the website where you can learn more about this book that explains really the MAGA movement that awoke a sleeping giant, possibly. And it describes America as having transitioned from a democracy to an oligarchy and now fast tracking towards an autocracy. Once again, that is State of the Union with Jack Cashman, who is sounding the alarm on the erosion of our constitutional pillars. A sobering reminder that a nation's future is only as secure as the integrity of the people that we choose to lead it. This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and if you don't know, now you know.